I saw the empty velvet box before I heard his excuses. It sat on our dining room table like an accusation, the deep burgundy interior catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows. My grandmother's sapphire necklace should have been nestled inside, the one she'd given me on her deathbed, the one she'd worn on her wedding day in 1952. The one that had survived wars and migrations and 70 years of family history. Instead, there was nothing but the impression in the velvet where the necklace had rested for the past 8 years, a ghost of something precious. My husband Trevor stood behind me, and I could feel his presence like a weight, heavy with guilt and something else. Defiance, maybe, or entitlement. "Isabelle," he started, his voice carrying that placating tone I'd come to recognize over our 10 years of marriage. "Before you get upset, let me explain. Where is it?" I asked, my voice steady, almost pleasant. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on that empty box, on the absence where beauty had been. "I sold it. But listen, I had a really good reason." I set the box down carefully, precisely, in the exact center of the table. My hands didn't shake. My breathing stayed even. Inside, something was shattering, but outside, I was marble. Cool, smooth, unbreakable. "You sold my grandmother's necklace," I repeated, still not looking at him. "The one she gave me 3 days before she died. The one she wore when she married my grandfather. That necklace." "Yes, but how much?" I turned to face him now, and I watched his expression shift, from defensive to uncertain. He'd expected tears, probably the kind of emotional reaction he could dismiss as hysteria, as overreaction, as proof that I was being unreasonable. Instead, I stood perfectly still, my face composed, waiting for his answer. $75,000, he said, and I saw a flicker of pride in his eyes. The appraiser said it was worth maybe 60, but I found a private collector who, when? 2 weeks ago. But Isabelle, we needed the money. The business is struggling, and I didn't want to worry you with the details. We needed $75,000 so badly that you sold my inheritance without telling me? I tilted my head slightly, genuinely curious about how he'd justify this. We have that much in our savings account, Trevor. We have twice that in investments. He shifted his weight, looked away. Those are for emergencies. And my grandmother's necklace wasn't? That's different. That money is ours. The necklace was just sitting in a box, not doing anyone any good. I held up my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. When I spoke, my voice was soft, almost gentle, but every word was deliberate. Never mistake my silence for ignorance, or my calm for weakness. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. He laughed, actually laughed, like I'd told a joke. What are you going to do, Isabelle? Leave me over a necklace? We've been married 10 years. We have a life together. You're not going anywhere. I picked up my purse from the chair where I'd set it when I'd arrived home from work. You're right about one thing. I'm not going anywhere. This is my house. My grandfather bought it and left it to me. But you? I walked toward the front door, stopped with my hand on the knob, and looked back at him. You should probably call a lawyer. You're being dramatic, he called after me, but I heard the uncertainty creeping into his voice. I left without another word, got into my car, and drove to the storage unit I'd rented 3 months ago, the one he didn't know about. The one where I'd been slowly, methodically moving things that mattered. Documents, photographs, heirlooms I'd hidden before he could sell them too. Because here's what Trevor didn't know. I discovered what he was doing 2 months ago. I'd found the emails to jewelry buyers, the appraisal documents, the messages to his brother about how Isabelle would never notice if a few pieces went missing. I'd known for 2 months that my husband was selling my inheritance piece by piece, funding his failing business with my family's legacy. And I'd spent those 2 months not crying, not confronting, not breaking. I'd spent them planning. The storage unit was small but climate controlled. Inside were boxes of carefully cataloged evidence, bank statements showing unexplained deposits, emails I'd recovered from his laptop, appraisals of jewelry that had mysteriously disappeared from my collection over the past year. 23 pieces in total. Nearly $400,000 worth of family heirlooms, sold without my knowledge or consent. But the necklace, my grandmother's necklace, that was the line. That was the piece he'd promised me he'd never touch, back when I'd first started noticing things going missing. Not the sapphire necklace he'd sworn, looking me right in the eye. I know how much that means to you. I would never. He'd lied, and now I had everything I needed. I pulled out my phone and called the number I'd been saving for this exact moment. It rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. Whitmore and Associates, how may I help you? This is Isabelle Crawford, I said. I'm ready to proceed with the divorce. The law office of Whitmore and Associates occupied the entire 20th floor of the Preston building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the harbor. I'd been here 3 times before. Consultations I'd scheduled during my lunch breaks, meetings Trevor knew nothing about. Helena Whitmore herself met me in the lobby. She was in her mid-50s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. Over 3 decades in family law had made her legendary. She didn't just win cases, she dismantled opposition. Isabelle, she said, shaking my hand firmly. I'm glad you called. Come with me. Her office was all clean lines and expensive furniture, with a wall of legal books and another of framed newspaper articles about high-profile cases she'd won. She gestured to a leather chair across from her desk, and I sat, feeling the weight of what I was about to set in motion. Tell me everything, Helena said, pulling out a legal pad. Start from the beginning. I'd prepared for this moment. I'd rehearsed this story in my head so many times that it came out smooth, chronological, complete. 10 months ago, I noticed my mother's diamond bracelet was missing from my jewelry box. When I asked Trevor about it, he said he'd had it cleaned and forgot to pick it up. He gave me a receipt from a jeweler across town. I believed him. Helena nodded, writing. 6 months ago, my aunt's pearl earrings disappeared. Then a ruby brooch that belonged to my great-grandmother. Each time, Trevor had an explanation. Being cleaned, in his safe deposit box for safekeeping, temporarily loaned to his sister for a wedding. Each time, I wanted to believe him. But you didn't, Helena observed. Not entirely. So I started paying attention. I noticed he'd been stressed about money, taking calls in the other room, spending more time at his office. His tech consulting business had been struggling since last year, but he kept telling me everything was fine. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo app, scrolling to a folder I'd labeled House Projects. Inside were hundreds of photos, screenshots, pictures of documents, evidence I'd been collecting methodically. 2 months ago, I installed monitoring software on our home computer. I know that sounds invasive, but it's your computer too, Helena interrupted. In your home. Perfectly legal. What did you find? Everything. Emails to auction houses and private collectors. Photographs of my jewelry that he'd been sending for appraisals. Spreadsheets tracking which pieces he'd already sold and for how much. I handed her my phone. It's all there. Dates, amounts, correspondence. Helena scrolled through, her expression growing more intense with each screen. This is excellent documentation. And he sold these items without your knowledge or consent? Every single one. Each piece was my personal property, gifts from family members, inheritances, things that belonged to me before we were married, not marital property. And today I came home and found the empty box from my grandmother's sapphire necklace sitting on our dining room table. The necklace she gave me on her deathbed. He sold it 2 weeks ago for $75,000 and didn't bother to hide the evidence. Helena set down the phone and looked at me with something like admiration. You've been incredibly smart about this, Isabelle. Most people in your situation react immediately, emotionally. They confront, they accuse, they give their spouse time to hide assets or create counter-narratives. But you documented everything first. I learned from my mother, I said quietly. She used to say that anger is fine, but strategy is better. She died when I was 19, but I've never forgotten that advice. Your mother was wise. Helena pulled up a document on her computer. Based on what you've shown me, we have multiple causes of action. Theft, obviously, though technically, since you're married, we'll call it conversion of separate property. Fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and possibly more, depending on what else we uncover in discovery. What happens now? Now we file for divorce. But more than that, we're going to get your property back, or its value, at minimum. Every penny he received from selling your jewelry, plus damages, plus attorney's fees. She smiled, and it wasn't warm. By the time we're done, Trevor Crawford is going to wish he'd never touched a single piece. There's something else, I said, pulling out a folder I'd brought with me. His business, Crawford Consulting. He always told me it was struggling, that clients were leaving, that he was barely breaking even. But look at this. I showed her bank statements I'd obtained from our joint accounts, the ones Trevor thought I never checked. Regular transfers of large amounts into his business account. Payments to luxury retailers. Charges at expensive restaurants I'd never been to. He wasn't using the money from my jewelry to save his business, I said. He was using it to fund a lifestyle I knew nothing about. Helena's eyes narrowed. Do you suspect infidelity? I know there's infidelity. I hired a private investigator 4 weeks ago. Trevor has been seeing someone named Vanessa Hayes for at least 8 months. She works at one of his client companies. He's been taking her to expensive dinners, buying her gifts, taking weekend trips he told me were for business conferences. I pulled out another folder, this one thick with photographs, receipts, a detailed log of Trevor's movements compiled by the investigator. Helena looked through it, her expression growing darker. This is extensive. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to have every piece of evidence before I made a move. Because once I did this, there would be no going back. And you're ready for that? No going back? I thought about Trevor's face when he told me the necklace was just sitting in a box, not doing anyone any good. I thought about my grandmother, pressing that necklace into my hands with trembling fingers, telling me it was the most valuable thing she owned, not because of the sapphires, but because it represented love that had lasted a lifetime. I'm ready, I said. Helena pulled out a thick stack of papers. Then let's begin. I'm going to need you to sign these documents. We'll file for divorce immediately, but we're also filing emergency motions for several things. First, an injunction preventing Trevor from selling, transferring, or disposing of any more assets. Second, a motion to freeze joint accounts. Third, a motion for temporary exclusive use and possession of the marital home, which you said you owned before the marriage. My grandfather left it to me in his will. Trevor's name isn't on the deed. Even better. We'll have him removed from the house within 48 hours. She looked up from her papers. This is going to get ugly, Isabelle. Trevor will fight back. He'll try to make you look vindictive, emotional, unreasonable. He'll paint himself as the victim. Are you prepared for that? He already thinks I'm dramatic, I said, remembering his laugh when I told him he'd made a mistake. Let him underestimate me. It'll make this easier. Helena smiled, a real smile this time, warm and approving. You're going to do just fine. 3. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I checked into the Harborview Hotel, a boutique property downtown where I'd stayed once for a work conference. The room was small but elegant, with a view of the water and a bed that felt enormous after years of sharing one with Trevor. I ordered room service, salmon with roasted vegetables, a glass of white wine, and ate slowly, mechanically, while my phone buzzed with increasingly frantic messages from my husband. Where are you, Isabelle? This is ridiculous. We need to talk about this like adults. You're overreacting. Fine, don't come home. See if I care. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called my best friend Octavia, who answered on the first ring. "Oh, thank God," she said. "I've been waiting for you to call me back. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Better than fine. I did it, Tavi. I actually did it." "Did what? Where are you?" "I left him. I filed for divorce. And I'm going to make sure he pays for every single thing he's stolen from me." There was a pause. Then, "It's about time. I'll be there in 20 minutes. What hotel?" Octavia arrived with a bottle of expensive champagne, a bag of chocolate-covered pretzels, and a fierce hug that made me realize I'd been holding myself together by sheer force of will. When she pulled back, her dark eyes were searching my face. "You're not crying," she observed. "I cried 2 months ago, when I first found out what he was doing. I cried for 3 days straight, alone in my car during lunch breaks, in the bathroom at work, in the shower where he couldn't hear me. I'm done crying." We sat on the hotel bed with the champagne between us, and I told her everything. Not just about today, but about the months of discovery, the careful documentation, the way I'd had to pretend everything was normal, while my husband systematically dismantled my inheritance. "I should have known something was wrong," Octavia said, her voice tight with anger on my behalf. "I should have pushed harder when you kept canceling our lunch dates, when you seemed distant. You couldn't have known. I didn't want anyone to know. Not until I was ready. Not until I had everything in place." I took a sip of champagne, felt the bubbles sharp against my tongue. "He thought I was naive. He thought I'd never notice, or that if I did, I'd just accept whatever excuse he gave me. He's been treating me like I'm stupid for years, I think. I just didn't see it clearly until now." What happens next? Helena, my lawyer, files the papers tomorrow morning. Trevor gets served, probably at his office, and then the real work begins. I pulled out my laptop and showed her the spreadsheet I'd created. A detailed accounting of every piece of jewelry Trevor had sold, every lie he'd told, every dollar he'd stolen. "This is like something from a movie," Octavia breathed, scrolling through the data. "You've been investigating your own husband." "I've been protecting myself," I corrected. "There's a difference." My phone buzzed again, another text from Trevor. "I know you're getting these messages. Stop being childish and come home." Octavia read it over my shoulder and made a disgusted sound. "He really doesn't get it, does he? He thinks you're going to come crawling back. He thinks I need him. He thinks I can't survive without him. That I'm too soft, too emotional, too dependent to actually leave." I set down my phone and looked at my best friend. He's about to learn exactly how wrong he is. "I'm so proud of you," Octavia said fiercely. "And I'm so sorry you had to go through this. But I'm proud of you for being smart about it, for not letting him see you coming." We finished the champagne and most of the pretzels, talking until nearly midnight. When Octavia finally left, she hugged me again at the door. "You're not alone in this," she said. "Whatever you need, whenever you need it, I'm here." After she left, I lay in the unfamiliar hotel bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city beyond my window. I should have felt devastated. My marriage was over. The man I'd loved for 12 years, married for 10, had betrayed me in the most fundamental way. "This necklace has been with me through everything," she'd said, her voice papery and thin. "Through the war, through leaving everything I knew behind, through 53 years with your grandfather. It's seen joy and pain and everything in between. And now it's yours. Grandma, I can't. You can, and you will. But Isabelle, listen to me." She'd gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Things are just things. They matter, yes. They carry memories, they connect us to our history. But they're not worth more than your dignity. They're not worth more than your peace. If you ever have to choose between holding on to something precious and keeping yourself whole, choose yourself. Always choose yourself." I'd promised her I would, holding that box to my chest as she drifted back to sleep. Now, lying in the hotel bed, I understood what she'd meant. The necklace was precious, yes. Losing it hurt. But what Trevor had really stolen wasn't the jewelry. It was my trust, my security, my belief that my marriage was built on honesty, and I was choosing myself. Finally, completely, without apology. I fell asleep with that thought, and I didn't dream. The next morning, I woke early and went for a run along the harbor path. The October air was crisp, the sky that perfect blue that only comes in autumn, and my breath fogged in front of me as I ran. I thought about the day ahead. Trevor would be served with divorce papers at his office. Helena had arranged for a process server to deliver them at 9 a.m. Maximum visibility, maximum humiliation. The same way he'd humiliated me by leaving that empty jewelry box on our table like trash. After my run, I showered, dressed in my favorite navy suit, armor for the battles ahead, and checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Trevor, 2 voicemails I didn't listen to, and 1 text that made me smile. You can't do this to me. No question mark. No please. Just entitlement, pure and simple. I forwarded the text to Helena, along with all the others from last night. Evidence of his character, his attitude, his belief that he controlled the narrative. Helena responded immediately. Perfect. Keep forwarding everything he sends. Also, can you come to the office at 10? We need to go over the emergency motions before the hearing this afternoon. I texted back my confirmation and drove to her office, feeling steadier than I had in months, maybe years. The meeting took 2 hours. Helena walked me through every document, explaining the legal strategy, preparing me for what Trevor's lawyer would likely argue in response to our motions. He'll say, "You're being vindictive," she explained, "that you're trying to punish him for a marital dispute, that he's blown the situation out of proportion." His lawyer, if he's smart, will try to frame the jewelry sales as a misunderstanding, a miscommunication between spouses about shared assets. But they weren't shared assets. I owned them before we were married. Exactly. Which is why we'll win. But be prepared for him to fight dirty. He might claim the jewelry was gifted to the marriage, that you'd verbally agreed he could sell items if necessary, that you're lying about not knowing. He might even claim you gave him permission and are now having regretful second thoughts. I felt anger surge, hot and sharp. He's going to lie, probably. Which is why your documentation is so important. You have timestamps. You have his emails discussing these sales while you were at work. You have the fact that he deposited the money into accounts you didn't have access to. The evidence tells a clear story. At noon, Helena's assistant brought in sandwiches and coffee. We ate while reviewing the final details, and at 1:30, we headed to the courthouse. The hearing was in a small courtroom on the 3rd floor, wood-paneled and formal, with harsh fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly surreal. Trevor wasn't there yet, but his lawyer was. A middle-aged man named Philip Harmon, who I recognized from television ads. Aggressive personal injury lawyer, the kind who promised maximum compensation and asked questions later. Interesting choice, Helena murmured as we took our seats. Playing the part of successful businessman, responsible husband, I wondered if anyone else could see the calculation behind it. The judge entered, Honorable Catherine Monroe, according to the nameplate on her bench. She was in her 60s, with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. This is a hearing on emergency motions filed by petitioner Isabelle Crawford, Judge Monroe said. Reading from her notes, Ms. Whitmore, you may proceed. Helena stood, projecting confidence and authority. Your Honor, we're requesting 3 emergency orders. First, an immediate injunction preventing respondent Trevor Crawford from selling, transferring, or disposing of any marital or separate assets. Second, temporary freezing of joint bank accounts. Third, exclusive use and possession of the marital residence, which is petitioner's separate property. On what grounds? on the grounds that Mr. Crawford has systematically and secretly stolen and sold Mrs. Crawford's separate property, jewelry valued at over $400,000 without her knowledge or consent. We have evidence he sold these items over the course of 10 months, deposited the proceeds into accounts she couldn't access, and used the money to fund personal expenses, including an extramarital affair. Judge Monroe's eyebrow raised slightly. That's quite an accusation. Mr. Harmon, your response? Philip stood, less smooth than Helena, more bluster. Your Honor, this is a gross mischaracterization of a simple marital dispute. Mr. and Mrs. Crawford have been married for 10 years. During that time, they've shared everything: finances, property, decisions. Some jewelry was sold, yes, but this was done with Mrs. Crawford's knowledge and approval, or at minimum, with the understanding that marital assets could be liquidated if necessary for family expenses. Do you have evidence of this approval? The judge asked. We have 10 years of marriage, Your Honor. 10 years of shared decision-making and mutual trust. Crawford never objected to these sales when they occurred. Because she didn't know about them, Helena interrupted. Your Honor, if I may? Judge Monroe nodded. Helena approached the bench with a thick folder. This is a timeline of the jewelry sales, compiled from Mr. Crawford's own emails and bank records. Each sale occurred while Mrs. Crawford was at work. Each deposit went into an account she had no access to. And most tellingly, when Mrs. Crawford asked about missing pieces, Mr. Crawford lied repeatedly about their whereabouts. This is documented in text messages we're prepared to present. She handed copies to the judge and to Philip, who flipped through them with growing discomfort. Your Honor, these emails are taken out of context, Philip started. They seem pretty clear to me, Judge Monroe said, reading. Mr. Crawford explicitly writes, Isabelle doesn't need to know about this. In reference to selling her grandmother's bracelet, how is that out of context? It's a figure of speech. It's theft, Helena said flatly. Theft of separate property clearly established as Mrs. Crawford's through inheritance and gift. Property she owned before the marriage. Property that has no claim of community ownership. Mr. Crawford took items that weren't his, sold them without permission, and hid the proceeds. That's not a marital dispute. That's a crime. The courtroom was silent. I sat perfectly still, watching Trevor's face redden, watching Philip shuffle papers, trying to find a defense. Mr. Harmon, Judge Monroe said, do you have any evidence that Mrs. Crawford consented to these sales? Any written agreement? Any testimony? Anything beyond your assertion that marriage implies consent? Not at this time, Your Honor, but will be prepared to present witnesses who can speak to the nature of the Crawfords' relationship. Not at this time means no, the judge said. Miss Whitmore, I'm granting your emergency motions. Mr. Crawford is hereby enjoined from selling, transferring, or disposing of any assets pending further proceedings. All joint accounts are frozen except for Mrs. Crawford to withdraw 50% for immediate living expenses. And Mr. Crawford, you are ordered to vacate the marital residence within 48 hours. Trevor stood up. Your Honor, that's my home. It's Mrs. Crawford's home. Judge Monroe corrected. Her name is on the deed, not yours. You'll have 48 hours to collect your personal belongings, supervised by Mrs. Crawford or her representative. Do you understand? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something new in his expression. Not anger or betrayal, but fear. The beginning of understanding that he'd miscalculated, that I wasn't who he thought I was. I held his gaze, my face calm, and let him see nothing. We'll be filing for a full accounting of all marital and separate property, Helena continued. We'll be deposing Mr. Crawford about the jewelry sales, about his business finances, and about how he spent the proceeds. And we'll be seeking full restitution plus damages plus attorney's fees. So ordered, Judge Monroe said. Hearing adjourned. Mr. Crawford, I suggest you find somewhere else to stay starting Friday. I didn't go back to the house that day. Instead, I called a locksmith and had them meet me there at 6 a.m. Friday morning, 2 hours before Trevor's deadline to leave. He'd called 17 times since the hearing. I hadn't answered once. The locksmith was a woman in her 30s named Keisha, efficient and professional. While she worked on changing all the exterior locks, I walked through the house I'd lived in for 8 years, seeing it with new eyes. This had been my grandfather's house, left to me when he died during my junior year of college. A small craftsman bungalow on Oak Street with hardwood floors and built-in bookshelves and a kitchen that smelled like his pipe tobacco for years after he was gone. Trevor and I had moved in after our wedding, and slowly, subtly, he'd transformed it. His furniture replaced my grandfather's antiques, sold, he'd said, to make room for our new life. His art on the walls, his preferences dictating paint colors, renovations, the overall aesthetic. I'd let it happen, hadn't I? I'd been so eager to be a good wife, to make him happy, to build our life together, that I'd let my grandfather's house become Trevor's house. And somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten it was mine. Not anymore. I walked into our bedroom, my bedroom now, and started pulling Trevor's clothes from the closet, folding them carefully into the suitcases I'd bought for this purpose. His expensive suits, his Italian shoes, his collection of silk ties. Everything that marked him as successful, sophisticated, the kind of man who deserved respect. But underneath the suits were the text messages to Vanessa. Underneath the sophistication was a man who stole from his wife and lied about it, who betrayed vows and trust and everything marriage was supposed to mean. By the time Keisha finished with the locks, I had 6 suitcases packed and sitting in the entryway, ready for Trevor to collect. All set, Keisha said, handing me 3 new sets of keys. Change the front door, back door, and garage. You want me to wait until he gets here? Sometimes these situations can get confrontational. That's okay, I said. My friend is coming to be here with me. But thank you. Octavia arrived 15 minutes later with coffee and breakfast sandwiches. We sat on the front porch, watching the street, waiting. Trevor pulled up at 7:45, 15 minutes early, driving his Tesla like he was making an entrance. He got out, saw me on the porch, and I watched him square his shoulders, prepare himself for confrontation. "Isabelle," he said, walking up the path. "We need to talk about this." "We don't," I replied pleasantly. "Your belongings are packed. They're in the entryway. You have until 8 to collect them and leave." "This is insane. You can't just kick me out of my own house." "It's not your house," Octavia interrupted. "It's never been your house. It was Isabelle's grandfather's house, and he left it to her. Your name isn't on the deed. You're not on the mortgage. You've been living here rent-free for 8 years, and now that arrangement is ending." Trevor's face flushed. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm the witness to this exchange," Octavia said coolly, "and the person who's going to call the police if you're not gone in 14 minutes. He looked back at me. "Isabelle, come on. You don't really want to do this. We can work this out. You stole $400,000 worth of my property," I said, keeping my voice level. "You sold my grandmother's necklace, the one you promised you'd never touch, without telling me. You used the money to take another woman on vacation." "Yeah, real noble." Trevor ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from countless arguments. He was regrouping, changing tactics. "Look, I made mistakes. I admit that. But Isabelle, we've been together 12 years. Doesn't that mean anything? Don't I get a chance to make this right?" "You had chances," I said. "Every time I asked about a missing piece and you lied to me. Every time you promised the necklace was safe. Every time you deposited stolen money into your secret account, instead of telling me the truth. You had 1,000 chances, Trevor. You just didn't think I'd ever find out." "I love you," he said, and I almost laughed. "No, you don't. You love what I provided, a home you didn't have to pay for, a wife who didn't question you, access to valuable property you could liquidate whenever you needed cash. You love having someone who believed you were successful when you were actually failing. But you don't love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have treated me like an ATM machine made of jewelry. He stared at me, and I saw the moment he realized charm wouldn't work, that appeals to our history wouldn't work, that nothing would work. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. You think you can just throw me out, take me for everything I have, and I'll just accept it? I have rights too, Isabelle. I'm going to fight you on every single thing. The house, the savings, the investments, all of it. And when we're done, you're going to wish you'd been reasonable." "I am being reasonable," I said. "I'm giving you 48 hours instead of calling the police immediately. I'm letting you take your belongings instead of having them destroyed. And I'm settling for legal remedies instead of public humiliation. Seems pretty reasonable to me." "You think you're so smart," he spit. "You think you've got this all figured out. But you don't know what you're doing. You're going to lose everything trying to punish me." I stood up, walked to the door, and held it open. "Your suitcases are inside. You have 11 minutes. Helena had advised me to let him think his digital life was private. Let him continue documenting his own misdeeds. 8 minutes later, he came out with the suitcases, his laptop bag, a box of office supplies. He loaded everything into his car without speaking, then turned back one more time. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," I replied. "It is." I watched him drive away, watched his Tesla disappear around the corner, and felt Octavia's hand on my shoulder. "You were amazing," she said. "Calm, controlled, completely unshakable. He expected you to cry or apologize or beg him to stay. Instead, you just ended him." "I ended us," I corrected. "There's a difference." We went inside and I locked the new locks behind us. The house felt different already. Lighter, cleaner, like something toxic had been removed. "What now?" Octavia asked. "Now I call the buyer," I said. The buyer's information had been in Trevor's emails, all of it. Names, addresses, phone numbers of every collector and auction house he'd dealt with over the past 10 months. But my grandmother's necklace had gone to a specific person, Nathaniel Vance, private collector, with an address in Beacon Hill and a reputation for acquiring estate jewelry. I'd done my research on Nathaniel Vance. 63 years old, retired investment banker, widower for 5 years. His late wife had been a jewelry designer, and after her death, he'd begun collecting pieces that reminded him of her work. By all accounts, he was legitimate, paid fair prices, respected provenance, had never been accused of dealing in stolen goods, which meant he'd bought my grandmother's necklace in good faith. You can sue for the necklace's return or its value. But before you do that, try talking to him. He might be willing to negotiate once he understands the situation. And if he's a decent person, he'll want to make it right. I called the number from Trevor's emails on Friday afternoon. A man answered on the third ring, his voice cultured and warm. "Vance Residence. Mr. Vance, my name is Isabelle Crawford. I believe you recently purchased a sapphire necklace from my husband, Trevor Crawford." There was a pause. "I did. Is there a problem?" "Yes. My husband sold you that necklace without my knowledge or permission. It was my personal property, an inheritance from my grandmother, and he had no right to sell it." Another pause, longer this time. "I see. That's concerning. Can you hold for a moment?" I heard him moving, a door closing. Then his voice came back clearer. "Mrs. Crawford, I'm very sorry to hear this. Your husband represented the necklace as jointly owned marital property that he was authorized to sell. He provided documentation." "Forged documentation," I interrupted gently. "Mr. Vance, I'm not accusing you of wrongdoing. You purchased the necklace in good faith. But the fact remains that it was stolen property, and I'd like to discuss options for its return." "Of course. Would you be available to meet in person? I think this conversation would be better face to face. I can come to Boston tomorrow. That would be perfect. Say 10 a.m.? I'll text you my address. I hung up feeling cautiously optimistic. He'd sounded reasonable, concerned, like someone who wanted to fix a mistake rather than defend it. Octavia had gone home, so I spent the evening alone in the house, walking through rooms that were mine again. I made dinner, just pasta and salad, nothing fancy, and ate at the kitchen table where my grandfather used to sit, where he'd taught me to play chess when I was 8. Life is like chess, he'd told me. You have to think 3 moves ahead. You have to protect your valuable pieces. And sometimes you have to sacrifice something to win the game. I hadn't understood then. I understood now. That night, I slept in my old bedroom, the one I'd used before Trevor moved in, before we'd taken over the master bedroom together. It was smaller, simpler, with a single bed and walls painted the pale blue my grandmother had chosen when I was 16. I slept better than I had in months. Saturday morning, I drove to Boston. The city was beautiful in October, trees turning gold and red, the air crisp with the promise of winter. Nathaniel Vance's address led me to a stunning brownstone in Beacon Hill, with flower boxes in the windows and a brass plaque beside the door. He answered himself, a tall man with silver hair, wearing slacks and a cardigan that looked expensive but comfortable. His eyes were kind, I noticed. Sad but kind. "Mrs. Crawford," he said, extending his hand. "Please, come in." The interior was elegant but lived in, with art on every wall and books stacked on every surface. He led me to a study lined with glass display cases, and I saw immediately why he collected jewelry. Each piece was displayed like art, beautifully lit, with small cards describing their provenance. "Please, sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair. "Can I offer you coffee?" "Tea? Coffee would be lovely. Thank you." He returned a few minutes later with 2 cups and a plate of cookies, settling into the chair across from mine. "I want to start by apologizing," he said. "Your husband told me the necklace was a family piece you jointly decided to sell to fund a business expansion. He showed me what appeared to be legitimate documentation, a letter of provenance, photographs, even what he claimed was your signature authorizing the sale." "He forged my signature?" "I believe so, yes. I compared it to the signature on the paperwork you'll need to file, and they don't match." He set down his coffee cup. "Mrs. Crawford, I've been collecting jewelry for 5 years, since my wife passed. She was a designer, and these pieces," he gestured around the room, "they help me feel connected to her. I would never knowingly purchase stolen property." "I believe you," I said, "and I appreciate your honesty. The question is, what do we do now?" He stood and walked to one of the display cases, removing my grandmother's necklace and bringing it to me. "This is yours. It belongs with you." I took it with shaking hands, feeling the weight of it, the familiar cool metal and smooth sapphires. My grandmother's necklace, back where it belonged. "Mr. Vance, I can't just take it. You paid $75,000, which I'll pursue recovering from your husband through legal channels," he interrupted. "Mrs. Crawford, I'm not a poor man. I can afford the loss if necessary. But more than that, I can't keep something that was stolen from you. It wouldn't be right." I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by his kindness. "Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me. I should have done more due diligence. I should have insisted on meeting you both, on confirming your consent. I didn't, and you suffered for it." He sat back down, his expression serious. "But Mrs. Crawford, I want to tell you something. Your husband approached me about selling other pieces as well. A diamond bracelet, some pearl earrings, a ruby brooch. I turned him down. I don't normally purchase multiple items from the same source in such a short time frame. It raises red flags." But he was persistent. My stomach clenched. Did he say why he wanted to sell so many pieces? "He said you were downsizing, moving to a smaller home, that you'd decided to liquidate some assets." Nathaniel's expression darkened. But the way he talked about the jewelry, there was no affection, no respect for its history. It was just merchandise to him. That's why I refused the additional pieces. Something felt off. I wish you'd been the only buyer he approached. So do I. He pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. This is my lawyer's information. I'm going to have him file suit against Trevor Crawford for fraud. And if you need me to testify about his conduct, about the forged documentation, I'll be happy to do so. That would be incredibly helpful. We talked for another hour, and I learned about his wife, about the jewelry she'd designed, about how collecting had become his way of grieving. He showed me pieces in his collection, told me their stories, and I understood that for him, jewelry wasn't about value. It was about connection, memory, love. Before I left, he walked me to the door and paused. Mrs. Crawford, may I offer you some advice? Please, men like your husband, they see the world as something to be exploited. They see relationships as transactional, people as resources. He looked at you and saw access to valuable property. He looked at me and saw a mark. He smiled sadly. But the thing about men like that is they always overreach. They take too much, push too far, and eventually they misjudge someone. Your husband misjudged you. He thought you'd never notice or never care enough to fight back. That's going to be his downfall. I'm counting on it, I said, driving back to Portland. I wore my grandmother's necklace, feeling its familiar weight against my skin. This was just one piece recovered, but it was the most important one, not because of its monetary value, but because of what it represented. My grandmother's voice came back to me, clear as if she were sitting in the passenger seat. Always choose yourself. I was choosing myself, and I wasn't done yet. Monday morning, I met with Helena again to update her on my meeting with Nathaniel Vance. He's giving you the necklace back and filing his own suit against Trevor? She looked impressed. That's incredibly fortunate. Most collectors would fight to keep the piece, argue they were good faith purchasers with rights to the property. He's a decent person, I said, unlike my husband. Speaking of whom, Trevor's lawyer has filed a response to our divorce petition. It's about what I expected. She slid a thick document across her desk. He's claiming irreconcilable differences, requesting his share of marital assets, and denying any wrongdoing regarding the jewelry. He's also requesting spousal support. I laughed, couldn't help it. Spousal support? From me? His argument is that he's been financially dependent on you, that his business has struggled, and that he needs time to get back on his feet. It's absurd, given that he's stolen over $400,000 from you. But his lawyer has to make some argument. What happens next? Discovery. We'll depose Trevor, his girlfriend Vanessa, possibly his business partners. We'll request full financial records going back years. Bank statements, tax returns, business accounts, everything. We'll document exactly how he spent the money from selling your jewelry. How long will this take? Months, probably. Maybe longer if he fights every step. But Isabelle, I want you to prepare yourself. This is going to get nastier. Before it's resolved, Trevor will try to make you look vindictive, unstable, greedy. He'll likely claim you gave him permission to sell the jewelry and are now regretting it. He might even suggest you're having a breakdown, that you're not thinking clearly. Let him try, I said. I have documentation of everything. Emails, bank records, witness testimony. He can spin whatever story he wants, but the facts don't change. That's the right attitude. Helena made some notes on her legal pad. I also want to discuss the house. Since it's your separate property, you'll retain it in the divorce. But we need to document all the improvements made during the marriage to determine if any were marital expenditures that Trevor can claim reimbursement for. He can't claim reimbursement if he paid for improvements with stolen money, I pointed out. Helena smiled. Exactly. Which is why we're going to track every renovation, every upgrade, every penny he claims to have invested, and show that it all came from selling your property. We spent the next 2 hours going through financial records, creating a timeline of expenses and corresponding jewelry sales. By the time we finished, the pattern was damning. Every major renovation to the house had been preceded by Trevor selling one of my pieces. The new kitchen cabinets, funded by my mother's diamond bracelet, the bathroom remodel, my aunt's pearl earrings, the landscaping, a gold locket that had belonged to my great-grandmother. He'd literally rebuilt my house using money stolen from my family's legacy. "This is going to play very well in court," Helena said, reviewing our timeline. "Trevor can't claim he was struggling financially if he was spending 6 figures on home improvements. And he can't claim he had your permission if he was hiding the source of the funds." After the meeting, I went to work for the first time since filing for divorce. I was an architect at a small firm downtown, a job I loved, though Trevor had always dismissed it as cute compared to his consulting business. My coworkers knew something was happening. I'd been distracted lately, taking mysterious phone calls, leaving for long lunches with Helena. But I hadn't told anyone the full story yet. Until that afternoon, when my boss Francine called me into her office. "Close the door," she said, her voice gentle. Francine was in her 50s, a brilliant architect who'd mentored me since I'd started at the firm 6 years ago. I sat across from her, suddenly nervous. "I'm going to ask you something." "You've seemed stressed lately, and I'm worried about you." "Nice." The kindness in her voice broke something open. I'd been so focused on strategy, on winning, that I hadn't let myself feel supported. "I'm getting divorced," I said. And then the whole story came pouring out. The stolen jewelry, the affair, the lawsuit, everything. Francine listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker as I spoke. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "How can I help?" she finally asked. "I don't know if you can." "Let me rephrase," she interrupted. "I'm going to help. The question is how. Do you need time off? Flexible hours? A raise so you can afford your legal fees?" I felt tears threatening. "Francine, I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, I'm offering. Isabelle, you're one of the best architects I've ever worked with. You're talented, dedicated, and you deserve support during this nightmare." She leaned forward. "Also, between you and me, I never liked Trevor. He came to the holiday party last year and spent the whole time talking about his business, barely mentioning your work at all. Made me want to punch him." I laughed through my tears. "You should have. Next time." She pulled up her calendar. "Take the rest of the week off. Come back Monday, and we'll figure out a schedule that works around your legal appointments. And I'm giving you the Riverside project, the community center renovation. It's high profile, good for your portfolio, and the client specifically requested you." "Thank you, I managed." "Thank you so much." "Don't thank me. Just keep being brilliant, and don't let that bastard take anything else from you." I left her office feeling buoyed, supported in a way I hadn't expected. For years, Trevor had made me feel small, had diminished my accomplishments, had treated my career as secondary to his. Now, with him gone, I was remembering who I'd been before him. Competent, talented, worthy of respect. That evening, I met Octavia for dinner at a small Italian restaurant near my house. She took one look at me and ordered a bottle of wine. "Okay, catch me up on everything," she said, once our glasses were full. I told her about Nathaniel Vance, about getting the necklace back, about Helena's strategy for discovery. I told her about Francine's support and the new project I'd been assigned. "You're killing it," Octavia said, raising her glass. "Seriously, Isabelle, a month ago, you were pretending everything was fine while your husband robbed you blind. Now you've filed for divorce, gotten your grandmother's necklace back, and you're about to take him for everything he's got. I'm in awe." "I'm not done yet," I said. "Getting the necklace back was huge, but there are still 22 other pieces out there. 22 items he sold, 22 buyers I need to track down. Are you going to try to get them all back?" "Some of them, maybe. The ones that matter most. But mostly, I want him to pay for what he did. I want every penny he received from selling my property, plus interest, plus damages. I want him to understand that what he did wasn't a victimless crime or a marital dispute. It was theft. Octavia studied me over her wine glass. You've changed, you know. You're harder now. Sharper. Is that bad? No. It's necessary. The old Isabelle would have forgiven him, tried to work it out, blamed herself for not being a better wife. This Isabelle knows better. This Isabelle is tired of being nice to people who don't deserve it. I said. We ordered pasta and salad and talked about other things. Octavia's job at the museum, her complicated relationship with her own family, the book she was reading. Normal conversation, the kind I'd missed during the months of pretending everything was fine. When we finished eating, Octavia walked me to my car. The October evening was cool, the streetlights casting long shadows. Can I ask you something? She said. Do you still love him? Even a little? I thought about it honestly. I love who I thought he was. The man I married, the one who seemed kind and supportive and honest. But that man never existed. He was always this person, someone who saw me as a resource, who took what he wanted and lied about it. I just didn't see it clearly until now. That's a good answer, Octavia said. It means you're healing. I drove home and spent the evening going through boxes in the basement. Things I hadn't looked at in years. My grandfather's chess set. My grandmother's recipe cards. Photo albums from before Trevor. From when I was younger and less guarded. I found pictures of myself at 22, newly graduated from architecture school, standing in front of my first design project. I looked confident in those photos, happy, unaware of what was coming. I wondered what that girl would think of who I'd become. Harder, yes, but also wiser. More careful with trust. More protective of what mattered. I hoped she'd understand. Discovery began 2 weeks later with Trevor's deposition. Helena had prepared me extensively. What questions he'd be asked, what he'd likely say, how to read his body language for lies. He'll try to minimize, she'd explained. He'll claim the jewelry wasn't that valuable, that you didn't care about it, that he had your implicit permission. Our job is to prove otherwise with documentation. The deposition took place in Helena's conference room, a neutral space with a long table and windows overlooking the harbor. Trevor arrived with Philip Harmon, both of them in expensive suits, both projecting confidence. I sat beside Helena, across from Trevor, close enough to see the muscle twitching in his jaw. The court reporter swore him in, and Helena began. Please state your full name for the record. Trevor James Crawford. And you're the respondent in the divorce case, Crawford versus Crawford? Yes, Mr. Crawford, I'm going to ask you about jewelry belonging to your wife, Isabelle Crawford. Are you aware that over the past 10 months, items from her personal jewelry collection have gone missing? I wouldn't say they went missing, Trevor said carefully. Some pieces were sold. By whom? By me. With Mrs. Crawford's knowledge and consent? He hesitated. She knew some items were being sold. Some? Which ones? Another hesitation. I'd have to check my records. Helena slid a document across the table. Let me help refresh your memory. This is an email from you to Anderson Auction House, dated March 15th of this year. You're offering to sell a diamond bracelet, and you write, quote, my wife doesn't know I'm doing this yet, but she won't mind. She never wears it anyway, end quote. Does that sound like someone with permission? Trevor's face reddened. That's taken out of context. What context makes she doesn't know I'm doing this sound like consent? I meant she didn't know that specific day. Obviously, she knew generally that we sometimes sold items. Did she? Helena pulled out another document. Here's a text message from Mrs. Crawford to you, dated March 23rd. She writes, have you seen my diamond bracelet, the one Mom gave me for my 30th birthday? I can't find it anywhere. And you respond, no idea. Maybe it's being cleaned. You lied to her about where it was. I was going to tell her. When? After you'd sold everything she owned. Helena's voice was sharp now. Mr. Crawford, over the past 10 months, you sold 23 pieces of jewelry belonging to your wife. That's 23 separate transactions, 23 deposits into accounts she had no access to, 23 opportunities to tell her the truth. And in 23 instances, you chose to lie. Is that accurate? I don't know if it was 23. I have the records. It was 23. She spread them across the table. Bank statements, emails, receipts, all color-coded and highlighted. Each of these items was Mrs. Crawford's separate property, inherited or gifted to her before your marriage. None of them were marital property. You had no right to sell them. Do you dispute that? Philip leaned over to whisper something to Trevor, who shook his head. I dispute that they weren't marital property, Trevor said. After 10 years of marriage, everything becomes shared. Not in Massachusetts, Helena interrupted. Separate property remains separate unless it's commingled or transmuted into marital property. Did Mrs. Crawford ever give you these items? Did she ever transfer ownership to you? Not formally. But not formally means no. Did she ever tell you explicitly that you could sell her jewelry? We discussed liquidating assets. That's not what I asked. Did she ever say, Trevor, you have my permission to sell my grandmother's necklace? The room was silent. Trevor looked at Philip, who couldn't help him because we all knew the answer. No, Trevor finally admitted. She never said that specifically. So you took items that didn't belong to you, sold them without permission, kept the money in secret accounts, and lied repeatedly when she asked where they were. Is that a fair summary? You're making it sound worse than it was. I'm describing what happened. If it sounds bad, that's because it was bad. Helena pulled out another document. Let's talk about what you did with the money. You told Mrs. Crawford your business was struggling, that you needed to cut costs. But these bank statements show regular deposits from the jewelry sales, followed by charges at expensive restaurants, luxury hotels, jewelry stores. Care to explain? Trevor's jaw clenched. Those were business expenses. Business expenses at Tiffany & Co. You purchased a $15,000 diamond bracelet. Who was that for? A client gift. The recipient's name is Vanessa Hayes. Is Miss Hayes a client? She works for a client. She's your girlfriend, Helena said flatly. You used money from selling your wife's jewelry to buy gifts for your mistress. Is that correct? Philip put his hand on Trevor's arm, but Trevor shook him off. That's not fair. Isabelle and I had been having problems for months. The marriage was basically over. But you were still living in her house, using her inheritance to fund your lifestyle, and lying to her about where her property was? Helena's voice was ice. Mr. Crawford, when exactly did you decide the marriage was over? Before or after you stole $400,000 worth of jewelry? I didn't steal anything. You took property that wasn't yours without permission. That's theft. The only question is whether it's criminal theft or just grounds for civil damages. She leaned forward. Let me ask you something else. Did you forge Mrs. Crawford's signature on documents related to these jewelry sales? Trevor went very still. I don't know what you're talking about. Nathaniel Vance has provided us with documents you gave him when you sold the sapphire necklace. They include what appears to be Mrs. Crawford's signature on a letter of authorization. Did you sign her name to that document? I may have signed some paperwork on her behalf. Without her knowledge or permission? She was busy and I needed to close the deal quickly. That's forgery, Mr. Crawford. That's a crime. The room felt suddenly smaller. The air heavier. Trevor looked at Philip, whose expression suggested he hadn't known about the forgery either. I think we need a break, Philip said. I need to consult with my client. Of course, Helena said smoothly. Let's reconvene in 20 minutes. Trevor and Philip left the conference room, and I heard them arguing in the hallway, Philip's voice sharp with anger. Helena turned to me, her expression satisfied. That went well. He admitted everything, I said, still processing what I'd just heard. not just admitted. He trapped himself. Every time he tried to justify his actions, he dug the hole deeper. And now we have his testimony under oath that he sold your property, lied about it, and forged your signature. Philip is probably telling him right now how much trouble he's in. When they returned, 20 minutes later, Trevor looked subdued, and Philip looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Before we continue, Philip said, my client would like to make a statement. Go ahead, Helena said. Trevor cleared his throat. I may have made some mistakes in how I handled this situation. I should have been more transparent with Isabelle about the financial pressures I was facing. I should have asked her permission before selling anything, and I definitely shouldn't have forged her signature. He looked directly at me for the first time. I'm sorry, Isabelle. I was under a lot of stress, and I made bad choices. It was a calculated apology, clearly coached by Philip. Admit to mistakes, show remorse, try to minimize damages. I held his gaze and said nothing. Helena continued the deposition for another 2 hours, methodically documenting every sale, every lie, every dollar spent. By the end, we had a complete record of Trevor's betrayal, all sworn testimony that could be used in court. When it was finally over, and Trevor and Philip had left, Helena and I sat in the empty conference room. How do you feel? She asked. Satisfied, I said, and sad. Hearing him admit to all of it, hearing him try to justify what he did, it's confirmation that I'm doing the right thing, but it still hurts. That's normal. You're grieving the marriage you thought you had. I'm grieving the person I thought he was, I corrected. The man I married would never have done this. But that man never existed. Helena nodded. The good news is, his testimony today gives us tremendous leverage. He admitted to theft, fraud, and forgery. Philip knows they can't win this case. I expect they'll approach us about settlement within a week. What kind of settlement? Full restitution of the jewelry's value, plus damages, plus your attorney's fees. Probably a total of $600,000 to $700,000. And you keep the house, all marital assets, everything. And what does he get? To avoid criminal charges, Helena said. That's the deal we'll offer. He pays you back everything he stole, and you won't pursue criminal prosecution for the forgery and theft. It was more than fair. It was merciful, even. Make the offer, I said. Philip called 3 days later, just as Helena had predicted. They wanted to settle. The negotiation took place in a neutral conference room at the courthouse, with both lawyers present. Trevor wasn't there. Philip said he was too emotional to participate productively. Translation: Helena had destroyed him in the deposition, and he couldn't face me again. My client is prepared to offer full restitution for the jewelry, Philip began. $375,000 based on the original purchase prices. $420,000, Helena interrupted. Based on current market value, which is what the pieces would be worth if Mrs. Crawford still had them, plus another $100,000 in damages for emotional distress, invasion of privacy, and fraud, plus Mrs. Crawford's attorney's fees, which are currently at $75,000 and climbing. Philip's face tightened. That's nearly $600,000. My client doesn't have that kind of liquid assets. Then he'll have to liquidate his business, sell his car, do whatever's necessary. He found the money to steal from his wife. He can find the money to pay her back. Be reasonable. We are being reasonable, Helena said. The reasonable thing would be to file criminal charges for the forgery and grand theft. Instead, we're offering to resolve this civilly, but the price for that consideration is full restitution. They went back and forth for an hour, Philip trying to negotiate lower numbers, Helena holding firm. Finally, Philip asked for a recess to call Trevor. When he came back, he looked defeated. My client agrees to the following: $420,000 for the jewelry, $50,000 in damages, and your attorney's fees up to $75,000. Total of $545,000, paid over 24 months. 12 months, Helena countered. And if he misses a single payment, the full amount becomes immediately due, and we reserve the right to file criminal charges. Philip sighed. I'll need to confirm with my client. Another recess, another phone call. This time when Philip returned, he had a signed agreement. We have a deal, he said. My client will pay $545,000 over 12 months. Crawford agrees not to pursue criminal charges related to the jewelry sales. Helena reviewed the agreement carefully, made a few changes to the wording, then slid it across to me. This is a good settlement, Isabelle. You're getting everything you're entitled to, plus damages. And you're doing it quickly, without a prolonged trial. I recommend accepting. I read through the document, seeing my marriage reduced to numbers and legal terms. $545,000. $45,000 per month for the next year. Monthly reminders of Trevor's betrayal, but also monthly confirmation that I'd won. I signed. Philip took the agreement and stood to leave, but paused at the door. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm sorry about all this. If I'd known what my client had done, I would have advised him differently. What he did was wrong. Thank you for saying that, I replied. After he left, Helena and I sat in the empty conference room, the sighing settlement between us. You did it, she said. You got justice. I got restitution, I corrected. Justice is different. What would justice look like to you? I thought about that. Justice would be him understanding the full weight of what he did. Not just the theft, but the betrayal. The way he made me doubt myself. The way he diminished my feelings about my family's legacy. Justice would be him feeling even a fraction of what I felt when I found that empty jewelry box. He might, Helena said. Losing over $500,000, plus his marriage, plus any remaining reputation. That's not nothing. And he'll spend the next year making payments, being constantly reminded of what he did. That's a kind of justice. Maybe she was right. Maybe justice didn't have to be dramatic or immediate. Maybe it was simply this: consequences, accountability, the slow recognition that actions have weight. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later in a brief hearing before Judge Monroe. Trevor didn't contest anything. The settlement covered all disputed issues, and there was nothing left to fight about. Judge Monroe reviewed the settlement, asked if we both understood and agreed to its terms, then signed the dissolution decree. Marriage dissolved, she said. Good luck to you both. Just like that, 10 years ended. 10 years of shared life, shared space, shared history, reduced to a judge's signature and a payment plan. Trevor left the courtroom without looking at me. I watched him go, feeling nothing but relief. Outside, Octavia was waiting. She'd taken the morning off work to be there, to support me through this final step. How do you feel? She asked, hugging me. Free, I said, and I meant it. The first payment arrived exactly 1 month after the settlement, a certified check for $45,000. I deposited it, and then did something I'd been planning for weeks. I called my aunt, my mother's sister, the one who'd given me the pearl earrings Trevor had sold. Aunt Veronica, I said when she answered. I need to tell you something, and I need you to not be angry. That's a concerning way to start a conversation, she said, but I heard the affection in her voice. What's going on, sweetheart? I told her everything. The discovery, the divorce, the settlement. I told her about the pearl earrings, about how Trevor had sold them for $8,000 and used the money to take Vanessa to a resort in Miami. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Isabelle, she finally said, why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I was ashamed. I felt like I should have known, should have prevented it somehow, like it was my fault for not paying attention. It was not your fault, she said firmly. What Trevor did was theft and betrayal. And the responsibility is entirely his. Do you understand me? I'm starting to. Good. Now about the earrings. I'm going to pay you back, I interrupted. From the settlement. I want to make this right. Absolutely not. The earrings were a gift to you, which means they were yours to do with as you pleased. If they'd been stolen, that's not your responsibility. But no buts. However, she continued, I will accept one thing from you. What's that? A promise that you'll wear them again someday. Maybe not the original pair. I know those are gone. But new ones, when you're ready. Something to remind you that you come from a long line of strong women who don't let anyone steal their shine. I was crying now, grateful tears. I promise. We talked for another hour, and she told me stories I'd never heard about my mother. About the jewelry she'd loved. About the legacy she'd wanted to pass down. Your mother would be so proud of you, Aunt Veronica said, before we hung up. Not because you won, but because you fought. Because you refused to accept being treated like you didn't matter. After that call, I started reaching out to other family members, telling them what had happened, apologizing for not being honest sooner, offering to compensate them for lost pieces. Each conversation was difficult, but each one also brought unexpected grace. My cousin Helena, different Helena than my lawyer, told me her sapphire ring had been worth less than the kindness I'd shown her at her wedding. My Uncle Thomas said the gold cufflinks were just metal, and family was more important. Over and over, I was offered forgiveness I didn't feel I deserved. But more than forgiveness, I was offered support. Rage on my behalf. Validation that what Trevor had done was unconscionable. One family member didn't offer grace. Trevor's mother, Diane. She called 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Her voice cold. I need to speak with you about what you've done to my son. What I've done? I repeated, genuinely confused. This vindictive lawsuit. This public humiliation. You've ruined his life, Isabelle. He can barely afford rent now because of the payments you're forcing him to make. His business is suffering. His reputation is destroyed. All because you couldn't forgive him for a few mistakes. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. Diane, your son stole over $400,000 from me. He sold my family's jewelry without permission, lied about it repeatedly, and used the money to fund an affair. Those aren't a few mistakes. That's systematic theft and fraud. You're twisting everything. I'm telling you the truth. Trevor stole from me. The court agreed. He's paying restitution because what he did was wrong, not because I'm vindictive. He only did it because his business was failing. He was under stress, trying to provide for you. By stealing from me? My voice rose despite my best efforts. That's not providing, Diane. That's theft. And if his business was really struggling that badly, he should have told me. We could have figured something out together. Instead, he chose to lie and steal. You've always been cold, she said. Always so calculating. Trevor deserved better than a wife who would destroy him over some jewelry. This conversation is over, I interrupted. I'm sorry you can't see what your son did wrong. I'm sorry you think I'm the villain here. But I'm not going to defend myself to you. Goodbye, Diane. I hung up, shaking with anger and hurt. For 10 years, Diane had been like a second mother to me. We'd spent holidays together, had regular phone calls, shared recipes and stories. And now she was calling me cold, calculating, vindictive. All because I'd refused to let her son rob me blind. Octavia came over that evening and found me pacing in my kitchen. His mother called, I said without preamble. She thinks I'm ruining Trevor's life. Of course she does, Octavia replied. She raised him to be entitled. She probably taught him that taking what he wanted was acceptable. That women should just accept being used. I can't believe I didn't see it before. The way she'd make little comments about my career, about how I should be home more, about how Trevor needed support. She was training me to be small, to accept less. But you didn't accept it. You fought back. And now she's dealing with the consequences of raising a son who thinks he can do whatever he wants without repercussions. We ordered takeout and watched bad reality TV, and slowly I felt myself calm down. Diane's opinion didn't matter. Trevor's opinion didn't matter. The only opinion that mattered was mine, and I knew I'd done the right thing. The second payment arrived on schedule, and the third and the fourth. Each one brought me closer to being made whole, at least financially. Emotionally, the healing was slower. I threw myself into work, into the Riverside Community Center project Francine had given me. It was challenging and consuming, requiring site visits and client meetings and late nights at the drafting table. But it was also deeply satisfying, creating something beautiful, something that would serve the community for decades. The client, a woman named Beatrice, who ran a local nonprofit, became something of a friend. She was in her 70s, sharp as a knife, and had built her organization from nothing. "I like your work," she told me one afternoon as we reviewed plans. "It's thoughtful. You design spaces that honor the people who'll use them." "Thank you. That's always been my goal. Can I ask you something personal?" I braced myself. "Sure." "You've seemed different lately. Lighter. Did something change?" I hadn't told her about the divorce, about Trevor, about any of it. But something in her expression made me trust her. "I left my husband," I said. "He was stealing from me. I got divorced, sued him, and now I'm rebuilding my life." Beatrice nodded slowly. "Good for you. Too many women stay in situations that diminish them because leaving seems harder than staying. You chose the hard path, and you'll be stronger for it. I hope so. I know so. I see it in your work. These designs," she gestured to the plans spread between us, "they're bolder than your earlier projects, more confident. Whatever you went through, it's made you better at what you do." She was right. Looking at my recent work, I could see the difference. Before, my designs had been competent but safe, always seeking approval, never pushing boundaries. Now, I was taking risks, trusting my instincts, creating spaces that challenged and inspired. Trevor had made me small in every aspect of my life. Without him, I was expanding, growing into the architect and the person I'd always had the potential to be. 6 months into the payment plan, I received an unexpected email. It was from Vanessa Hayes, Trevor's former girlfriend. The subject line read, "I'm sorry. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. Dear Isabelle, you don't know me, but I know far too much about you. I'm the woman Trevor was seeing during your marriage. I'm the woman he bought jewelry for, using money he stole from you. I'm the woman who helped destroy your marriage. I'm writing because I recently found I'm also writing to tell you something Trevor probably won't admit. He's struggling. The payments are destroying him financially. His business is failing. He's had to move into a studio apartment, and he's bitter, so bitter about losing you, though he'd never say it directly. I don't think he realized what he had until it was gone. He's spent the past 6 months trying to convince anyone who'll listen that you're vindictive, that you overreacted, that he was the victim. But I've seen his emails. Yes, he kept seeing me for a while after your divorce, until I found out the truth. I know what he really thinks. He knows he messed up. He knows he lost someone remarkable for someone ultimately meaningless. And that knowledge is eating him alive. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for him. I'm telling you because you deserve to know that your revenge worked. You wanted him to understand what he did, to face consequences, to feel the weight of his choices. He does, every day. I hope you're doing well. I hope you've moved on to better things. And I hope you never waste another thought on Trevor Crawford, because he's not worth it. Sincerely, Vanessa. I read the email 3 times, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Satisfaction that Trevor was facing consequences. Sadness that Vanessa had been lied to as well. And something like closure. Confirmation that my decision to fight back had been right. I showed the email to Helena at our final meeting, the one where she'd present me with the paperwork showing the settlement was paid in full. Interesting, she said, reading it. How do you feel about it? Relieved, mostly. For months, I've wondered if I did the right thing, if I was too harsh, too unforgiving. But reading this, seeing that Trevor is still lying, still playing the victim, it reminds me why I left. You did the right thing, Helena said firmly. And you did it smartly, with documentation and strategy. You could have acted emotionally, impulsively, and lost everything. Instead, you won. She handed me a folder. Final settlement documents. As of today, Trevor has paid you $545,000. The debt is satisfied. The divorce is complete and legally. You're done with him. Done, I repeated, letting the words sink in. Completely done. Unless he somehow violates the settlement terms, you never have to interact with him again. I walked out of Helena's office for the last time, carrying that folder, feeling the weight of the past year lift off my shoulders. It was over. Really, truly over. That evening, I did something I'd been planning for months. I hosted a dinner party. Not a celebration of the divorce, that felt too bitter. Instead, a celebration of survival, of rebuilding, of everything I'd learned and everyone who'd supported me. I invited Octavia and Aunt Veronica and Francine and Beatrice. I invited my cousin Helena and my uncle Thomas. I invited the women from my yoga class who'd become friends. I invited Nathaniel Vance, who'd driven down from Boston just for the evening. We gathered in my dining room, the same room where I'd first seen that empty jewelry box, the room where everything had begun to unravel. But tonight it was full of warmth and laughter and people who cared about me. I'd cooked everything myself, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Cooking for people I loved, in a home that was truly mine, felt like reclaiming something essential. Before we ate, Octavia raised her glass. I'd like to propose a toast to Isabelle, who spent the past year proving that strength doesn't have to look like anger, that justice doesn't have to look like vengeance, and that the best revenge is building a life so good that your enemies become irrelevant. Everyone drank to that, and I felt tears prick my eyes. Good tears this time. During dinner, Nathaniel pulled me aside. I wanted to thank you again for handling our situation with such grace. Most people would have sued me, fought to get the necklace back through the courts. Instead, you called me directly, explained the situation, and trusted me to do the right thing. You did do the right thing, I said. You gave me back my grandmother's necklace without a fight. That meant everything. I'm curious, he said. What happened to the necklace? Are you wearing it? I touched my throat where the sapphire necklace rested against my skin. Every day. It reminds me of my grandmother, of everything she survived, of the strength I inherited from her. She'd be proud of you. I hope so. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Aunt Veronica pulled me into a tight hug. Your mother would be so proud, she whispered. Not just because of how you handled Trevor, but because of who you became in the process. Stronger, wiser, more yourself. After everyone left, I sat alone in my clean kitchen, surrounded by empty dishes. I thought about Trevor, alone in his studio apartment, bitter about payments he'd brought on himself. I thought about Vanessa's email, about his inability to accept responsibility, about how he'd spend the rest of his life blaming me for consequences he'd earned. And I realized I didn't care, not anymore. He'd become irrelevant to my happiness, irrelevant to my life, irrelevant to everything that mattered. That was the real revenge, not his suffering, but my indifference to it. A year after the divorce was finalized, I received an invitation to speak at a legal conference about protecting assets in marriage. Helena had submitted my case, with my permission, as an example of successful documentation and strategic divorce planning. You don't have to do it, Helena said when she first mentioned it, but I think your story could help a lot of people. There are so many women and men who ignore red flags, who trust blindly, who don't protect themselves until it's too late. You could show them a different way. I agreed, though standing in front of 300 lawyers and financial advisors to discuss my failed marriage wasn't exactly how I'd envisioned spending a Saturday. The conference was held in a large hotel ballroom, all business casual and PowerPoint presentations. I wore a burgundy suit, armor, and my grandmother's necklace. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium feeling surprisingly calm. I'd prepared extensively, worked with a speaking coach, practiced my delivery until it was smooth and confident. "My name is Isabelle Crawford," I began, "and 3 years ago, my husband started stealing from me. Not openly, not with violence or threats, but quietly, methodically, piece by piece. He stole jewelry I'd inherited from my grandmother, my mother, my aunts. He sold 23 items over 10 months, collected over $400,000, and spent it on renovations to my house and gifts for his girlfriend. And I didn't notice until it was almost too late." The room was silent, attentive. I'm not here to tell you I'm special or uniquely smart. I made mistakes. I ignored red flags. I trusted when I should have verified. What I did right, what I want to talk about today, is how I documented everything once I realized what was happening. How I built a case before I confronted. How I turned anger into strategy. For the next 45 minutes, I walked them through the timeline, from the first missing bracelet to the final settlement payment. I showed slides of the spreadsheets I'd created, the monitoring software I'd installed, the photographs I'd taken of his emails. I explained how I'd worked with Helena to freeze assets, secure the house, build an airtight case. The key, I said, was patience. Every instinct told me to confront him immediately, to scream and cry and demand answers. But I knew that if I did, he'd have time to hide assets, delete evidence, create counter-narratives. So I waited. I documented. I planned. I clicked to the next slide, which showed the settlement agreement. This is what strategy looks like. Full restitution, damages, attorney's fees, everything I was entitled to, paid over 12 months. No long trial, no he said, she said testimony, no drawn-out custody battle over property. Just clean, documented facts that he couldn't deny. A hand went up in the audience. What would you tell someone who's in a similar situation right now? Someone who suspects their spouse is hiding assets or stealing from them. Document everything, I said immediately. Before you confront, before you file for divorce, before you do anything that might tip them off, document. Screenshot emails, photograph bank statements, create a timeline, and most importantly, consult with a lawyer before taking action. I met with Helena 3 times before I filed for divorce. And that preparation made all the difference. Another hand, do you regret how you handled it? Do you wish you'd tried to work it out instead? I paused, considering the question honestly. No, because working it out would have required him to be someone he wasn't. It would have required him to value me, to respect my property, to prioritize our marriage over his own convenience. He'd proven over and over that he wasn't that person. Staying would have just given him more opportunities to take from me. "What about forgiveness?" someone else asked. "Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" "I don't know," I admitted. Forgiveness is complicated. I've forgiven myself for not seeing the signs earlier. I've forgiven myself for trusting someone who didn't deserve it. But forgiving him? I'm not sure that's necessary for my healing. What matters is that I've moved on. His actions don't control my life anymore. After the presentation, several people approached me, mostly women, though a few men, thanking me for sharing my story. One woman, probably in her 60s, had tears in her eyes. "My husband did something similar," she said quietly, 20 years ago. "He cleaned out our retirement accounts and left me with nothing." I never fought back, because everyone told me it would be too expensive, too difficult, that I should just move on. Hearing your story makes me realize I should have fought. It's never too late, I told her. If you still have documentation, if there's still a case to be made, talk to a lawyer. Don't let him get away with it just because time has passed. She squeezed my hand. Thank you. Really, thank you. Driving home that evening, I felt something unexpected. Pride. Not just in winning, not just in getting justice, but in using my experience to help others. In transforming my private pain into public education. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. An unknown number, but I answered anyway. Is this Isabelle Crawford? Yes? This is Amanda Stevenson from Portland Magazine. We're doing a feature on women in architecture, and your name came up. I understand you recently completed the Riverside Community Center project. I did, yes. We'd love to interview you for the article. Are you available next week? Yes, absolutely. After we arranged the details and hung up, I sat in my car, staring at my house. My house. The one my grandfather had left me. The one I'd almost lost to someone who saw it as his right to take. The interview with Portland Magazine led to other opportunities. A profile in Architectural Digest. An invitation to speak at my college's alumni event. A request to serve on the board of a women's shelter, helping them design safe, empowering spaces. My career was flourishing in ways I'd never imagined possible when I'd been married to Trevor. Not because he'd been holding me back directly, but because he'd made me small, cautious, afraid to shine too brightly. Without him, I was luminous. 18 months after the divorce, I saw Trevor for the first time since the courthouse. I was having coffee with a potential client at a cafe downtown when he walked in. He didn't see me at first. He was on his phone, distracted, looking rumpled in a way he never would have allowed before. I watched him order, watched him wait for his drink, and felt absolutely nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even curiosity about how he was doing. He was just a man who'd once been in my life and wasn't anymore. Then he turned and our eyes met, and I saw recognition flash across his face. Surprise, discomfort, and something else. Shame, maybe. He walked over to my table. My client, sensing tension, excused herself to take a phone call outside. Isabelle, Trevor said. Hi. Hello, Trevor. Silence. He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. You look good. Different. Thank you. More silence. I didn't help him. Didn't make small talk, didn't ease the awkwardness. I just waited. I've been meaning to reach out, he finally said. To apologize. For everything. All right. I mean it. What I did was wrong. I hurt you. I betrayed your trust. I stole from you. And I'm sorry. I studied him, looking for sincerity. He seemed genuine, but I'd believed his sincerity before. I'd believed lots of things that turned out to be lies. Thank you for the apology, I said. I appreciate it. Do you think, he hesitated. Do you think you could ever forgive me? I don't know, I said, honestly. Maybe someday. But Trevor, whether or not I forgive you isn't really the point. You have to live with what you did. You have to figure out how to be a better person going forward. My forgiveness doesn't change that. He nodded, looking down at his coffee cup. You're right. You're always right. I'm not always right. I just learned to trust myself more than I trusted you. I deserved that. Yes, I agreed. You did. My client came back inside, and Trevor took the hint. I should go. It was good to see you, Isabelle. Really. Goodbye, Trevor. After he left, my client settled back into her seat with raised eyebrows. Ex-husband? Yes. The one who stole from me. The jewelry case? I read about that. You handled it brilliantly. Thank you. It was a learning experience. We continued our meeting, and I successfully pitched her on a new office building project. Walking to my car afterward, I realized I was smiling. Not because of Trevor's apology, though it was nice to hear, but because of how little it had affected me. 2 years ago, seeing him would have ruined my entire week, Now it was just a brief, mildly unpleasant encounter that I'd forget by tomorrow. I'd moved on. Completely, thoroughly, undeniably moved on. That evening, I met Octavia for dinner at our favorite Thai restaurant. I told her about running into Trevor, about his apology, about my complete lack of emotional reaction. "That's huge," she said. "You're officially over him." I've been over him, but this confirmed it. So what's next? Are you dating? Because I have this coworker. No, I interrupted, laughing. No setups. I'm not ready to date yet. It's been 18 months, and I've spent those 18 months rebuilding my life, my career, my sense of self. I'm not going to rush into another relationship just because enough time has passed. When I'm ready, I'll know. Octavia nodded, understanding. Fair enough. Just promise me you won't wait too long. You deserve to be happy, Isabelle. You deserve to be loved by someone who actually deserves you. I promise. But right now, I'm happy just being on my own. I like my life. I like who I am. That's enough for now. And it was. I had work I loved, friends who supported me, a home that was mine, financial security I'd fought to reclaim. I had the sapphire necklace around my neck and the knowledge that I'd stood up for myself when it mattered most. Maybe someday I'd find someone to share that life with. Someone honest, kind, someone who valued me. But if I didn't, that was okay too. Because I'd learned something important. I didn't need someone else to complete me. I was already complete. 2 years after the divorce, I received a letter from Trevor's lawyer. Not Philip Harmon. He'd stopped representing Trevor after the settlement, but a new attorney I didn't recognize. The letter was brief. Trevor was filing for bankruptcy. His business had failed completely. He'd accumulated significant debt, and he was using Chapter 7 to discharge everything he could, including, potentially, the remainder of what he owed me, though the settlement had been paid in full. He was claiming emotional damages from the divorce had destroyed his mental health and earning capacity, and he wanted relief from potential future claims. I called Helena immediately. "Can he do that?" I asked. "Could he use bankruptcy to avoid responsibility?" "Not really," Helena said. "Your settlement is paid in full, so there's nothing active for him to discharge, and the bankruptcy code specifically prevents discharge of debts related to fraud, which is what his theft was. This is likely just posturing, trying to make himself look like the victim again." "Should I respond?" "We'll file a response noting that all debts to you are satisfied and that you have no further claims. But Isabelle, you need to let this go. Trevor's financial problems are his own. He made bad choices, and now he's dealing with the consequences. That's not your concern anymore." She was right, but it still bothered me. Not because I felt sorry for Trevor. I didn't. But because he was still trying to manipulate the narrative. Still trying to cast himself as the victim of my vindictiveness. I showed the letter to Octavia that evening over wine. "He's pathetic," she said bluntly. "He stole from you, got caught, paid you back, and now he's trying to blame you for his continued failures. It's embarrassing. To file a counterclaim, to make sure the court understands exactly what he did." "Don't," Octavia interrupted. "That's exactly what he wants. He wants you to engage, to fight, to spend more time and energy on him. The best thing you can do is ignore him. File the minimum response and move on." She was right. I'd spent enough of my life dealing with Trevor's manipulation. I wasn't going to give him any more. Helena filed a brief response. Petitioner notes that all debts owed to her by Mr. Crawford have been satisfied in full. Petitioner has no further claims and requests no further involvement in Mr. Crawford's bankruptcy proceedings. Clean, simple, final. The bankruptcy proceeding continued without me, and I went back to living my life. I finished the Riverside Community Center, and it opened to rave reviews. The mayor came to the ribbon cutting, and there were articles in 3 different papers about how the design was innovative yet welcoming, sophisticated yet accessible. I was asked to join the architecture faculty at the university as an adjunct professor, teaching 1 class per semester on sustainable design. I accepted and discovered I loved teaching, loved seeing young designers develop their voices, their confidence, their understanding of how buildings could shape lives. I was promoted to senior architect at my firm, with a raise that finally reflected my value. Francine announced she'd be retiring in 5 years and wanted me to be considered for managing partner. My life was full, rich, meaningful, and Trevor was bankrupt, filing legal documents that no one cared about, trying to rewrite history that everyone already understood. The contrast was poetic. 3 months after his bankruptcy filing, I saw an announcement online. Trevor had moved to Arizona. A fresh start. The accompanying post said, "New opportunities, lessons learned, good riddance," Octavia said when I showed her. "Maybe in Arizona he'll find someone else to steal from and leave you alone." But I wasn't worried about Trevor anymore. He'd become a footnote in my story, not a chapter. An unfortunate detour, not a destination. I'd built something better than revenge. I'd built a life. 3 years after the divorce, on a crisp October morning, I stood in my grandmother's house, the one she'd lived in before moving to hospice, the one that had sat empty for years. My Aunt Veronica had finally decided to sell it, and she'd asked me to come say goodbye before the estate sale people came through. I walked through rooms that smelled like dust and memories, touching furniture my grandmother had cherished, finding pieces of her life tucked into drawers and closets. In her bedroom, in a jewelry box on her dresser, I found something unexpected. A letter addressed to me in her handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. "My dearest Isabelle, if you're reading this, I've been gone for some time, and you found your way back to this house. I'm glad. There are things I wanted to tell you, but never quite found the right moment. The sapphire necklace I gave you was more valuable than you know. Not because of the stones, though they're real and worth a fortune, but because of what it represents. Your grandfather gave me that necklace on our wedding day. We had nothing. We were refugees, starting over in a new country with just the clothes on our backs and hope in our hearts. But he'd saved for months, worked 3 jobs to buy me something beautiful. Something that said, 'You deserve precious things.' I wore that necklace through war and peace, through poverty and prosperity, through joy and grief. And it reminded me, always, that I was worthy of beauty, of love, of good things. I gave it to you because I saw something in you that worried me. You were settling, my dear. Settling for a man who didn't see your worth. Settling for less than you deserved. Settling for small when you were meant for grand. I hoped the necklace would remind you of your value, would give you something to hold on to when life tried to make you small. But more than the necklace, I wanted to give you this lesson. Never let anyone treat you as less than precious. Not a partner, not a friend, not family, not yourself. You are valuable. You are worthy. You deserve to be treated with care. If someone steals from you, whether it's property or dignity or joy, fight back. Not with violence or cruelty, but with strength, with clarity, with the absolute certainty that you deserve better. I love you, my darling girl. I hope I taught you to love yourself just as fiercely. Your grandmother." I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. She'd known. Even before I'd married Trevor, before he'd started stealing. I touched it through the fabric, feeling its weight, its presence. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered to the empty room. "I understand now." That evening, I hosted a small dinner party, something I did regularly now, comfortable in my role as host, confident in my space. Octavia was there, and Aunt Veronica, and Francine, and Beatrice. I'd also invited a woman named Simone who'd attended one of my legal conference presentations and had become a friend. She was a financial advisor who specialized in helping women protect their assets, and we'd collaborated on several client education events. Over dinner, I told them about finding my grandmother's letter, about the lesson she'd been trying to teach me, even from beyond death. She sounds remarkable, Simone said. The kind of woman who understood that love sometimes means teaching hard lessons. She was remarkable, I agreed. And I wish I'd understood what she was trying to tell me sooner. I wish I hadn't had to learn pain. But you did learn, Aunt Veronica said gently. That's what matters. You could have stayed with Trevor, could have convinced yourself the jewelry didn't matter, could have chosen the easier path of denial. Instead, you chose the hard path of truth. Your grandmother would be proud. After dinner, while we were having coffee and dessert, Simone pulled me aside. I wanted to run something by you, she said. I've been thinking about starting a nonprofit, an organization that helps people going through difficult divorces, especially those involving hidden assets or financial abuse. Legal resources, financial planning, emotional support. And I wondered if you'd consider being on the founding board. Me, you've been through it. You understand the challenges, and you've become something of an advocate without even trying. Your conference presentations, your willingness to share your story, it's helping people. I think you could help even more. I thought about it, about using my experience to create something that could help others, about taking everything Trevor had stolen from me and transforming it into something that prevented others from experiencing the same pain. I'm in, I said. Absolutely in. Over the next few months, Simone and I worked with lawyers and counselors and financial experts to create the Precious Things Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping people protect themselves from financial abuse in relationships. We offered free legal consultations, financial planning services, and support groups. We taught workshops on recognizing red flags, documenting abuse, building cases for divorce. We connected people with resources they didn't know existed. And we did it all with the understanding that came from experience. Simone had been through her own difficult divorce years ago. I had my story with Trevor. Other board members had their own experiences of betrayal and recovery. We knew what it felt like to be stolen from, lied to, diminished, and we were determined to help others fight back. The foundation launched on a cold December morning, 18 months after that dinner conversation. We held a press conference at City Hall, with the mayor speaking about the importance of protecting vulnerable people from financial abuse. A reporter asked me why I'd gotten involved. Because someone stole from me, I said simply. And I had the resources, financial, educational, emotional, to fight back. But not everyone has those resources. This foundation exists to level the playing field, to give people the tools they need to protect themselves. Do you see this work as revenge against your ex-husband? I smiled. No, revenge would be about hurting him. This is about helping others. There's a difference. That quote made it into 3 different newspapers and was shared thousands of times on social media. I started getting emails and messages from people who'd experienced similar situations, thanking me for speaking up, asking for advice, sharing their own stories. Each message reminded me why this work mattered, why my pain hadn't been meaningless, why fighting back had been worth it. 4 years after the divorce, I went on my first real date. His name was Malcolm, and he was a contractor I'd worked with on the Riverside project. He'd asked me out 3 times over the past year, and each time I gently declined, saying I wasn't ready. The 4th time, I surprised both of us by saying yes. We went to dinner at a small Italian restaurant, and I spent the first 20 minutes analyzing everything he said for red flags. Was he asking too many questions about my finances? Was he being too charming? Was he trying to manipulate me? Finally, Malcolm set down his wine glass and looked at me with kind eyes. You're waiting for me to disappoint you, aren't you? I laughed, caught. Is it that obvious? Pretty obvious. And I get it. I looked you up online after we met. I know what you went through with your ex-husband. I understand why you'd be cautious. You looked me up? Is that creepy? I thought it was due diligence. I thought about it. Actually, it's smart. I should have done more due diligence before I married Trevor. Well, for what it's worth, I'm an open book. Divorced 5 years ago, amicably. 2 kids who live with their mom, but spend weekends with me. No criminal record, credit score in the high 700s, and I've never stolen anyone's jewelry. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time all evening. That's a low bar, and yet apparently necessary to state. He leaned forward. Isabelle, I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm not asking you to ignore your instincts or pretend your past didn't happen. I'm just asking you to give me a chance to prove I'm one of the good ones. Okay, I said. I can do that. We talked for 3 hours, and I learned about his childhood in Vermont, his 10-year marriage that had ended, not because of betrayal, but because they'd grown into different people. His kids, Emma, 8, and Oliver, 6, who loved soccer and Legos and Saturday morning pancakes. He asked about my work, my foundation, my architecture projects. He listened when I talked, asked follow-up questions, seemed genuinely interested in my life. At the end of the night, he walked me to my car and didn't try to kiss me. Can I see you again? He asked. Yes, I said. I'd like that. We went on a second date, then a third. After the 5th date, he kissed me goodnight, gentle and Malcolm was patient with my hesitations, understanding when I needed space, clear about his intentions. He didn't rush me, didn't push for more than I was ready to give, didn't try to fix my past pain. He just showed up, consistently and honestly, letting me learn to trust again at my own pace. 6 months into our relationship, he asked if I wanted to go away for a weekend. Not far, just a cabin in the mountains, a quiet place to escape the city. I said yes, then immediately panicked. Octavia talked me through it. This is good, she insisted. You're taking a risk, letting someone in. That's healthy. What if I'm making another mistake? What if I'm missing red flags again? You're not. Malcolm is different. He's transparent, he's consistent, he's proven himself over months of dating. And you're different too. You're not ignoring your instincts. You're not settling. You're not accepting less than you deserve. She was right. I was different. I'd learned to trust myself more than I trusted anyone else. And my instincts about Malcolm were all positive. The weekend was lovely. Hiking and cooking together, and long conversations by the fireplace. On our last night there, sitting on the cabin's porch watching the stars, Malcolm took my hand. I want to tell you something, he said. And I want you to know there's no pressure, no expectation. I just want to be honest. Okay, I'm falling in love with you, Isabelle. Actually, I think I've been in love with you for months. And I know you've been hurt. I know you have every reason to be cautious. So I'm not asking you to— Malcolm, you don't have to respond, he interrupted gently. I just wanted you to know. But I did want to respond, because somewhere over the past 6 months, without quite realizing it, I'd started falling too. I'm scared, I admitted. I'm terrified of being that vulnerable again, of trusting someone enough to hurt me. But I'm also tired of letting Trevor's betrayal control my life. Tired of being so guarded that I can't let good things in. So what do you want to do? I want to try. I want to be brave enough to believe that not everyone is Trevor, that some people are honest and kind and worth the risk. I can be patient, Malcolm said. We can take this as slow as you need. I don't want slow, I said. So I think maybe it's time to be brave. I kissed him then, and it felt like taking a leap, scary and exhilarating, and exactly right. Malcolm and I had been together for a year when I received an unexpected phone call. It was from Philip Harmon, Trevor's original lawyer. Mrs. Crawford, or should I say Ms. Crawford, he began. Isabella's fine. What can I do for you, Philip? I wanted to let you know that Trevor passed away. Heart attack, 3 days ago. He had me listed as his emergency contact for legal matters. I sat down slowly, processing this information. Trevor was dead. The man who'd stolen from me, who'd betrayed me, who'd made me question everything about myself. He was gone. "Thank you for telling me," I said, my voice steady despite the shock. "There's more. Trevor left a will, and you're mentioned in it. I don't want anything from him. It's not property or money. It's a letter. He asked that I give it to you in the event of his death. May I send it to you?" I hesitated, then agreed. What could it hurt now? The letter arrived 2 days later, a single page in an envelope marked with my name in Trevor's handwriting. I waited until I was alone in my house, my sanctuary, before opening it. "Isabelle, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Probably a heart attack. It runs in the family, and I haven't been taking care of myself. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. What I did to you was unforgivable, and I've spent the last 4 years understanding exactly how badly I messed up. The bankruptcy, the business failure, the move to Arizona. None of it worked. I couldn't outrun what I'd done. Every time I looked at jewelry, every time I saw a sapphire, every time I tried to build something, I thought about you, about what I'd stolen, about who I'd become. You were the best thing in my life, and I destroyed that through my own greed and arrogance. I thought I was smart, that I could take what I wanted without consequences. I was wrong. I've thought a lot about the day you confronted me, about how calm you were. You didn't scream or cry or fall apart. You just looked at me like I was a stranger, and maybe that's what hurt most, realizing you'd already moved on, already written me off. I want you to know that you were right to fight back, right to demand justice, right to refuse to be small. You taught me something. I hope you kept the house, kept your career, kept building the life I tried to tear down. And I hope, someday, you can think of me without anger. Not with forgiveness necessarily, but with the understanding that I was a fool who threw away something precious." Trevor, I read the letter twice, then set it down and stared out the window at my garden, the one I'd replanted after the divorce, choosing flowers Malcolm's kids had helped me select. Trevor was dead, and he died knowing exactly what he'd lost, exactly what he'd done, exactly how badly he'd failed. I should have felt satisfaction, vindication, triumph. The man who'd hurt me had suffered, had lost everything, had died alone, with nothing but regrets. Instead, I felt sad. Not for him exactly, but for the waste of it all, for the marriage that could have been if he'd been honest, for the person he might have become if he'd chosen differently. But mostly, I felt grateful. Grateful that I'd fought back. Grateful that I'd rebuilt. Grateful that his choices hadn't destroyed me. I called Malcolm and told him about Trevor's death, about the letter. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. "Okay, actually. It's strange. I thought this moment would feel bigger somehow, more significant. But he's just gone. And my life goes on. Do you want me to come over?" "Yes, please." When Malcolm arrived, he found me in the garden. He spent 4 years understanding what he'd done wrong, but he never tried to make it right. He just wrote a letter and died. "Some people can't face what they've done while they're alive," Malcolm observed. "They can only acknowledge it at the end." "I feel sorry for him," I admitted. "Not enough to wish things had been different. I'm glad I left him, glad I fought back. But I'm sorry he spent the last years of his life knowing he destroyed something good and couldn't fix it." "That's very generous of you. It's honest. I've spent 4 years building something better than revenge. I'm not going to let his death pull me back into bitterness." We sat in the garden until it got dark, then went inside and made dinner together. Malcolm told me stories about his kids' soccer game that weekend, about the new project his construction company had landed, about normal, everyday things that had nothing to do with Trevor or death or the past. And I realized something important. Trevor's death changed nothing about my life. I'd already moved on, already healed, already built something new. His absence from the world was no different than his absence from my daily life had been for the past 4 years. I'd won not because he'd suffered, but because I'd thrived. 5 years after the divorce, the Precious Things Foundation held its first annual gala. We'd helped over 200 people through difficult divorces, recovered millions in stolen assets, and become a recognized resource for financial abuse survivors. The gala was Simone's idea, a fundraiser and awareness event, bringing together donors and supporters and people we'd helped. I'd resisted initially, uncomfortable with the attention, but she'd convinced me. People need to see the face of survival, she'd argued. They need to know that women who've been stolen from and betrayed can rebuild, can thrive, can turn their pain into purpose. So there I was, in a beautiful ballroom wearing a green dress and my grandmother's sapphire necklace, surrounded by 200 people who'd come to support our work. The evening included dinner, a silent auction, and testimonials for people we'd helped. One woman, close to my age, stood at the podium and told her story. A husband who'd stolen her business, her savings, her sense of self-worth. With the foundation's help, she'd fought back, won, and was now running a successful company again. I came to the Precious Things Foundation broken, she said, her voice strong despite the emotion. I left powerful, and that's what they do. They don't just help you fight. They help you remember who you are. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium feeling nervous but determined. 5 years ago, I began. My husband sold my grandmother's sapphire necklace without my permission. It was worth $75,000, but its real value was immeasurable. It was my grandmother's wedding gift, a symbol of survival and love and strength. When I discovered what he'd done, I had a choice. I could accept it, could let it go, could convince myself it was just jewelry. Or I could fight back. I touched the necklace at my throat. I fought back. Not just for this necklace, which I eventually recovered, but for everything he'd stolen. My property, my trust, my sense of security. And more than that, I fought for my own worth. The Precious Things Foundation exists because I'm not unique. Every day, people are stolen from by partners who should protect them. People who have their assets drained, their property sold, their dignity compromised. And too often, they're told it's not worth fighting, that it's just money, that they should move on. But it's never just money. It's respect. It's power. It's the message we send about what we'll tolerate. This foundation helps people fight back, legally, financially, emotionally. We give them the tools Trevor never thought I'd have. And we help them build lives that are stronger than their betrayers ever imagined possible. The applause was overwhelming. After my speech, person after person approached me, sharing their own stories, thanking me for creating this resource, telling me how much it meant. One man, probably in his 70s, shook my hand with tears in his eyes. My wife cleaned out our accounts and left me penniless, he said. I thought my life was over. But your foundation helped me document everything, file the right paperwork, get my money back. I just wanted to thank you for seeing that men can be victims too. Of course, I said. Financial abuse has no gender. Everyone deserves protection. The gala raised over $500,000, enough to expand our services, hire more staff, help more people. Simone and I stayed late, talking with the last few guests, glowing with the success of the evening. We did it, she said, hugging me. We built something real. We built something that lasts, I corrected. This is going to help people for years. Driving home that night, still wearing my grandmother's necklace, I thought about the journey from that moment of discovery, finding the empty jewelry box on my dining room table, to tonight. 5 years of pain and growth and transformation. Trevor had tried to steal my precious things. Instead, he taught me exactly how precious I was. And I'd taken that lesson and built something that would prevent others from having to learn it the hard way. That was better than revenge. That was legacy. Malcolm proposed on a spring morning in my garden, the one we'd planted together, the one where his kids had helped me choose flowers. Emma and Oliver were there, holding a banner they'd made that said, "Will you marry our dad?" in crooked letters decorated with glitter and stickers. I looked at Malcolm, kind, patient, honest Malcolm, who'd spent 2 years proving he was exactly who he claimed to be, who'd never asked me to be smaller, to hide my success, to pretend my past hadn't happened. "Yes," I said, and the kids cheered, dropping their banner to run over and hug me. The wedding was small, held in my grandmother's house, the one Aunt Veronica had decided not to sell after all, the one she'd restored and given to me as a wedding gift. "Your grandmother would want you to have it," she'd said. "She'd want you to fill it with the kind of love she had with your grandfather." We were married in the living room where my grandmother had lived for 50 years, surrounded by 40 people who actually mattered: Octavia and Aunt Veronica and Francine and Beatrice and Simone, and all the people who'd supported me through the darkest time of my life. Emma and Oliver were the flower children, taking their roles very seriously. Octavia was my maid of honor, standing beside me in a dress the exact color of my grandmother's sapphires. And I wore the necklace, of course, the one Trevor had tried to steal, the one Nathaniel Vance had returned, the one my grandmother had given me as both gift and lesson. During our vows, Malcolm took my hands and spoke directly to me, ignoring the small audience. "Isabelle, you've taught me that strength doesn't mean never being hurt. It means refusing to let hurt define you. You've shown me what resilience looks like, what rebuilding looks like, what it means to choose yourself, even when it's hard." His voice caught with emotion. "I promise to be worthy of your trust. I promise to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. I promise to protect what's precious to you, to honor your history, to never take your strength for granted. And I promise to love you, not despite what you've been through, but including it, all of you, always." When it was my turn, I looked at this man who'd waited patiently while I healed, who'd proved himself through actions rather than words, who'd earned my trust day by day. Malcolm, 5 years ago, I didn't think I'd ever want to marry again. I thought I'd exhausted my capacity for trust, for vulnerability, for believing someone could be good. But you changed that. Not by pushing, not by trying to fix me, but by simply being exactly who you are. I squeezed his hands. "You've shown me that my first marriage failed not because I'm broken, but because I chose someone broken. You've taught me that love doesn't require me to be small, and partnership doesn't mean losing myself. And you've given me something I didn't think I'd find again: the ability to be fully known and fully loved at the same time." There were tears, mine, his, Octavia's, even tough Aunt Veronica dabbing at her eyes. The officiant pronounced us married, and Malcolm kissed me, while Emma and Oliver cheered and threw flower petals that mostly landed on themselves. At the reception, Octavia raised her glass for a toast. "I've known Isabelle for 15 years, she began. I watched her fall in love with someone who didn't deserve her. I watched that person take and take and take until there was almost nothing left. And then I watched her fight back." She looked directly at me. But the fighting back, that was just the beginning. The real transformation came after. When Isabelle decided that winning wasn't enough, that she wanted to build something better than revenge. When she took her pain and turned it into purpose, Octavia smiled. "Malcolm, you're marrying a woman who knows exactly what she's worth, who won't settle, won't be diminished, won't accept less than she deserves. You're marrying someone who's been tested and came through stronger. That's a gift. Don't waste it." "I won't," Malcolm promised. Later, dancing with my new husband while our kids spun in circles nearby, I felt my grandmother's necklace warm against my skin. I imagined her watching, proud, knowing I'd finally understood her lesson. "You deserve precious things," she told me. "Never forget that." I'd forgotten for a while. I'd let someone convince me I wasn't worth protecting, wasn't worth honesty, wasn't worth basic respect. But I'd remembered. I'd fought to remember. And now I was building something new, not just a marriage, but a life that honored everything I'd learned. About strength and vulnerability, about justice and mercy, about knowing when to fight and when to let go. Trevor had tried to steal my precious things. Instead, he taught me to protect them fiercely. And the most precious thing I'd learned to protect was myself. 7 years after the divorce, I received a letter that completed the circle in a way I hadn't expected. It was from Vanessa Hayes, Trevor's former girlfriend, the woman who'd written to me years ago, apologizing for her unknowing role in my betrayal. "Dear Isabelle, I hope this letter finds you well. I've followed your work with the Precious Things Foundation from afar, and I've been incredibly moved by what you've built. I'm writing because I want to tell you something I should have told you years ago. I'm the one who reported Trevor to the authorities for fraud. After I learned the truth about the jewelry, I couldn't let it go. I started investigating, asking questions, and I discovered he'd defrauded other people too. Clients, business partners, people who trusted him. So I went to the police and gave them everything I knew. It didn't amount to much in the end. He'd paid you back through the settlement, and the other frauds were too small to prosecute. But I needed to do something. I needed to try to make it right. I'm writing now because I want you to know that your choice to fight back, publicly, legally, completely, it changed me. It showed me what accountability looks like, what justice looks like, what refusing to be a victim looks like. I've since gone back to school and become a forensic accountant. I specialize in uncovering hidden assets in divorces, in finding the money people try to hide. And I do it because of you. Because you showed me that silence enables abuse, and speaking up, fighting back, can prevent it. I donate to the Precious Things Foundation every month. It's small, but it's my way of saying thank you. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like. Thank you for turning your pain into something that helps others. With admiration and gratitude, Vanessa. I read the letter 3 times, feeling emotions I couldn't quite name. Vanessa had been part of my betrayal, yes, but she'd also been lied to, used, manipulated by Trevor, just like I had. And she tried to make it right in her own way. I wrote back, "Dear Vanessa, thank you for your letter and for your honesty. I had no idea you'd tried to hold Trevor accountable through legal channels. That must have been difficult, and I appreciate it more than you know. I also appreciate your work as a forensic accountant. The more people we have fighting financial abuse, exposing hidden assets, refusing to let betrayers get away with theft, the better. You're doing important work. As for your donations to the foundation, thank you. Every contribution helps us reach more people, provide more services, build more safety nets for those who need them. But more than the money, thank you for your transformation, for taking what could have been just guilt and shame and turning it into purpose. That's what healing looks like. Not forgetting what happened, but using it to become someone who prevents it from happening to others. You were a victim too, Vanessa. Trevor lied to you, used you, hurt you. I hope you found healing and peace. With appreciation, Isabelle." I showed Malcolm the letter that evening. We were in our home, the house my grandfather had left me, now filled with Malcolm's kids' artwork and family photos and evidence of the life we built together. "That's powerful," he said after reading both letters. "The ripple effects of your choice to fight back, they're still spreading. I never thought about it that way. I just wanted justice for myself. But you're right. Every person who hears the story, who sees that fighting back is possible, who learns they don't have to accept being stolen from, that's a ripple, more than a ripple. It's a wave. The foundation had grown beyond anything Simone and I had imagined. We now had 3 full-time lawyers, 2 forensic accountants, a team of counselors, and partnerships with law firms across 6 states. We'd helped over 1,000 people recover stolen assets, file for divorce, rebuild their lives. And every time I spoke at a conference or a fundraiser, every time I shared my story, someone would approach me afterward with tears in their eyes, thanking me for giving them permission to fight back. That was the real legacy. Not the settlement I'd won from Trevor, not the jewelry I'd recovered, not even the foundation itself. The legacy was the permission, the example that showed others they didn't have to accept betrayal, didn't have to stay small, didn't have to let theft go unpunished. Emma, now 12, came into the living room with her homework. "Mom, can you help me with my history project?" She called me Mom now, had for almost a year. Not because she didn't love her biological mother. She did, fiercely, but because she said having two moms just meant more love, not divided love. "Of course, sweetheart. What's the project?" "We have to interview someone who stood up for something important." "Can I interview you? About the jewelry and the divorce and the foundation?" I looked at Malcolm, who shrugged with a smile. "Are you sure?" I asked Emma. "That's a pretty heavy topic, Mrs. Patterson said it's important to learn about strong women, and Octavia told me you're the strongest woman she knows." "Octavia talks too much," I said, but I was smiling. "Okay, let's do it." We spent the next hour with Emma's recorder running, me answering her thoughtful questions about what had happened, how I'd responded, what I'd learned. "Were you scared?" she asked. "Terrified. Every day." But being scared didn't mean I shouldn't act. It just meant I had to be brave. What's the difference? Brave isn't not being afraid. Brave is being afraid and doing it anyway. Emma nodded seriously, writing in her notebook. "And do you still think about Trevor? About what he did?" I considered the question honestly. "Sometimes, but not like I used to. He's not an open wound anymore. He's a scar, a reminder of what I survived, what I learned, who I became because of it." "That's good," Emma said. "Dad says you can't change the past, but you can choose what it means." Your dad is very wise. After Emma finished her interview and went to do the rest of her homework, Malcolm and I sat together on the couch, his arm around me, comfortable in our shared silence. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't fought back?" he asked. "If you just let Trevor get away with it?" I used to wonder, but now I know I'd be someone else. Someone smaller, more bitter, less confident. Someone who'd learned that her pain didn't matter, that theft was acceptable if it came from someone you loved. And instead I learned that I matter, that my boundaries matter, that standing up for myself isn't selfish or vindictive. It's necessary. I leaned into him, and I learned that losing something, even a marriage, can be the beginning of finding something better. "I'm glad you found me," Malcolm said softly. "I'm glad I found myself first," I replied, "because that's what let me recognize you when you showed up. I knew what I deserved, so I could see that you were offering it." That night, after Malcolm and the kids were asleep, I went to my office and opened the... Inside was the velvet box with my grandmother's necklace, and beside it, a folder containing everything from the divorce, the settlement agreement, Helena's final invoice, newspaper articles about the case, letters from people I'd helped through the foundation. I pulled out a blank piece of paper and began to write. Not a letter to anyone specific, but a record for myself. A document of everything I'd learned, everything I wanted to remember. 7 years ago, I discovered that someone I loved had been stealing from me. The theft hurt, but the betrayal hurt worse. And worst of all was the realization that I'd been complicit, not in the stealing, but in my own diminishment. I'd made myself small to make him comfortable. I'd ignored red flags to maintain peace. I'd accepted less than I deserved because I thought that was what love required. I fought back, not because I wanted revenge. Though, I won't lie, revenge was sweet. I fought back because I needed to prove to myself that I mattered, that my grandmother's necklace mattered, that my boundaries and my property and my dignity mattered. And in fighting back, I learned the most important lesson of my life. Never mistake someone else's theft for your own worthlessness. Never let betrayal convince you that you deserved to be betrayed. Never accept being small to make room for someone else's cruelty. The jewelry Trevor stole was valuable, yes, but what I recovered was more valuable still. My sense of self, my belief in my own worth, my refusal to accept less than I deserve. He tried to steal my precious things. Instead, he taught me that I am the most precious thing. And no one, not a husband, not a partner, not anyone, gets to take that from me ever again. I signed the document, dated it, and placed it in the folder with everything else. Evidence not just of what Trevor had stolen, but of what I'd reclaimed. Then I went to bed beside my husband, in my house, in my life, and slept peacefully. Because I'd won. Not just the legal battle, not just the settlement, but the war for my own soul. And that victory was permanent. 10 years after the divorce, the Precious Things Foundation hosted its annual gala at a new venue, a beautiful art gallery that had once been a jewelry store. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stood at the podium in a silver dress, my grandmother's necklace gleaming under the lights, looking out at 500 people who'd come to support our work. 10 years ago, I began. My husband sold my grandmother's sapphire necklace without my knowledge or permission. That theft set in motion a series of events that changed my life completely. I divorced him. I sued him. I got back not just the necklace, but every penny he'd stolen. And then I built something from that pain. This foundation, which has now helped over 5,000 people recover from financial abuse. But tonight, I don't want to talk about revenge or justice or even recovery. I want to talk about transformation. I touched the necklace at my throat. This necklace represents something different to me now than it did 10 years ago. Then it was evidence of theft, proof of betrayal, a symbol of everything I'd lost. Now it's a reminder that precious things can be recovered, that betrayal doesn't have to be permanent, that you can take the worst thing that ever happened to you and transform it into something that helps others. My grandmother wore this necklace through war and peace, through loss and love, through every challenge life threw at her. She gave it to me with the instruction to always choose myself, to never let anyone treat me as less than precious. I didn't understand that lesson immediately. It took theft and divorce and years of healing. But I understand it now. You are precious. Your boundaries are precious. Your dignity is precious. Your sense of self-worth is precious. And when someone tries to steal those things, whether through theft or abuse or manipulation or simple disrespect, you have every right to fight back. Not with violence, not with cruelty, but with clarity, with documentation, with legal action, with the absolute certainty that you deserve better. The Precious Things Foundation exists because everyone deserves to know they're worth protecting, because no one should have to choose between financial security and personal dignity, because fighting back should be possible, accessible, supported. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for supporting this work, and thank you for believing, as I do, that we all deserve to be treated as precious, because we are. The applause was thunderous. People stood, some crying, some smiling, all moved by the message that had brought us together. After the formal program ended, I mingled with guests, shaking hands and accepting thanks and hearing stories. A woman my age told me she'd left her husband last week, inspired by reading about my case. A man in his 30s said the foundation had helped him recover $100,000 his ex-wife had hidden. A teenage girl said she'd done her senior project on financial abuse and wanted to become a lawyer who helped people like me. Each story reinforced what I'd learned over the past decade. Pain shared becomes power. Silence enables abuse. But speaking up, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, creates change. Malcolm found me near midnight, after the last guests had left. Emma and Oliver had come to the gala too, now 15 and 13, old enough to understand what the foundation did and why it mattered. "We're proud of you, Mom," Emma said, hugging me. "So proud," Oliver echoed. Malcolm kissed my forehead. Ready to go home? Home. The word meant something different now than it had 10 years ago. Then, home had been a place where I wasn't safe, where my property wasn't protected, where I had to be small to survive. Now, home was sanctuary, partnership, love built on honesty and mutual respect. We drove through the quiet city streets, and I watched the lights blur past my window, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Trevor trying to steal my grandmother's necklace had been the catalyst, yes, but the real transformation had come from my choice to fight back, to refuse to accept theft, to demand accountability, and everything that followed, the divorce, the settlement, the foundation. Even meeting Malcolm had flowed from that single choice to value myself enough to fight. My grandmother had been right. The necklace was never just jewelry. It was a test, a lesson, a reminder of what I deserved. And I'd passed. Not perfectly, not immediately, but eventually. I'd learned to choose myself, to protect what was precious, to refuse to be small. And in doing so, I'd built a life more beautiful than anything Trevor had tried to steal from me. The buyer had given him more than he'd bargained for. Not just legal consequences and financial ruin, but the living example of a woman who refused to be diminished. And that example would outlast us both.